Hey everybody, today I'm going to be seeing if I can actually heat up with light the world's whitest material called Spectralon. It reflects over 99% of visible light with my solar scorcher here. So Spectralon is actually the whitest material in the world. And what that means is it diffusively reflects light. And it does so at equal magnitude. So it diffusively reflects all the different wavelengths of light equally, so it looks white. And it does so at an extremely high rate. And so it reflects over 99% of visible light. Now the difference between something like this and a mirror is a mirror actually spectrally reflects light, meaning that it preserves the angle of incidence so that you can see the image on it. But things that are white like Spectralon here, or a white piece of paper even, diffusively reflect light. So they don't preserve the angle of incidence, meaning that when light hits it, it spreads out everywhere. So for something to be the whitest material, what that means is that it diffusively reflects almost all the light that hits it and it spreads it out everywhere. And I showed this in a previous video when I shined my bright burning laser on it. And you can see that it just lights up the whole room. And what was really interesting about that experiment is this laser is a burning laser. It usually just burns anything that it touches. But when I shined it on my Spectralon here, the Spectralon didn't even heat up at all because it was reflecting almost all of the light that was hitting it, and so none of it got absorbed, so the energy wasn't absorbed to heat it up. So that led me to a challenge. Can I actually heat Spectralon up with light? Well, it's a really hot day out here right now, so I want to try to use the sun to heat up my Spectralon. But I need to collect a lot of sunlight, and to do that, I need a giant magnifying glass. And I happen to have a giant magnifying glass today. Now this type of magnifying glass is called a Fresnel lens, and it works a little bit different than a normal magnifying glass, but the effect is the same. It basically collects all of the light in this whole area here and concentrates it down to a tiny spot. So basically I'm going to take all of the light in this square area here and concentrate it down to a single point and shine it on my Spectralon and see if I can actually heat it up. Now normally when you do this, you can heat things up to extremely hot degrees, thousands of degrees. In fact, you can even melt rock with this method. Whoa. So I'm gonna turn off the lens by putting a blanket over it. As soon as it dims, you can see the rock glowing red. So in order to monitor the temperature of this, it's actually kind of hard to see because the light is so bright that we collect from the sun that you probably won't be able to see really anything. It'll just look like a really bright spot. So I have a thermal imaging camera here, and I'm gonna show what it looks like under the thermal imager and see if we can actually detect a rise in temperature from the Spectralon on the ground there under the sunlight. Okay, this is what it looks like just sitting on a black backdrop with the sun shining on it. You can see it sitting in the middle there. So the black backdrop is at 60 degrees Celsius and the Spectralon's just at 30 degrees. Okay, let's put our Spectralon on here. Okay. Okay, let's do this. 3, 2, 1. So you can actually see that blue divot there, that kind of blue hole in the center. That's where the Spectralon is. And that's the spot that's not heating up at all. You actually don't see a rise in temperature. So it looks like even though the surrounding area is getting upwards of 200 degrees Celsius pretty quickly, there's no rise in temperature on the Spectralon. The block's starting to melt, but not the Spectralon. The Spectralon isn't hot at all, but the block below it is completely melted. So just from the diffuse heat, this block is just melted. That wasn't even focused on it, it was melting. All the heat was completely focused on the Spectralon, and it's still not even hot to the touch. So instead of this blue block here, I'm gonna get something a little more white so it doesn't absorb so much below it. Now let's try to focus it all on the Spectralon again for a long time and see if we can even heat it up at all. Okay, here we go. So the Spectralon's as cold as can be. Uh-oh, but now we got black smoke on it. Okay, so our Spectralon survived easily, but I'm kind of bummed. You can see that it got smoke on it, so it got dirty. So I had this spacer in between, and this is the board that it was sitting on. So I was focusing it on the Spectralon, but you can see that the board below it still got burned, even though it was out of focus. But the Spectralon didn't melt or get burned at all. The smoke on here is just from the smoke condensing onto it from the burning wood below it. I want to see if I can scrub this off. So this type of stuff is the same reason why when you're outside and you have dark colored clothing on in the sunlight, you feel a lot hotter because your clothing's absorbing the sunlight. Whereas when you have a white shirt on, it doesn't absorb the sunlight as much, and so you don't feel as hot. It doesn't get to as high a temperature. So if you could make clothing out of Spectralon, that would be really cool. You would hardly absorb any heat from the sun and you'd stay as cool as can be. Okay, so I was able to actually sand off the surface and get the smoke off of it, so my Spectralon's back. You can see how white it is again. And thanks again for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, remember to hit the subscribe button and hit the bell to be notified when my latest video's out. And check out theactionlab.com if you haven't seen the Action Lab subscription box yet. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.